time and quickly trace the development of the science of psychology, it has always been reductionistic. And maybe that's because it grew up in a reductionistic age of science, when science in the last several hundred years has sought to eliminate any explanatory variable that wasn't necessary. Occam's razor.
Mm-hmm.
So when you apply Occam's razor, you sometimes tend to go too far and reduce. Not put in as much as actually needs to be in to describe reality.
Right.
Einstein said science should be as simple as possible, but not simpler.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Possible. Anyway, Freud, one of the main psychological geniuses of all time, reduced everything to sex. Adler reduced everything to power. So even the big boys and the geniuses have been somewhat reductionistic.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if we look at the advertising industry and its psychographics, it's always been very reductionistic too. You can find scales that people invented, didn't derive empirically in a scientific way, but they kind of just thought about it and they made up questions. And they put in psychographics that they thought would be relevant, like, how persuadable are you by advertising is a common one. Might not even be a very valid question. When you analyze it statistically, you might see that it's very affected by social acceptability and people giving prestige responses and so on. So psychographics has not been scientific or holistic within the marketing and advertising world
mm-hmm.
ever. And that's bothered me for decades. And so over decades, I've tried to, even the driver tags came from the same motivation on my part.
Right.
We started with 1 million words in the English language, and then boiled it down from there by empirical means.
Yeah, it's one of the biggest factor analysis that's been done, in my opinion.
And probably.
Starting with all words. I mean, you can't get any broader than that. Going to the entire dictionary, starting with that, and then factoring it down through principal component analysis, factor analysis, and all those fun things.
Yeah, so what I've discovered over the years is that there are a number of psychographic scales that have been developed by people that have never found their way into the advertising marketing sphere. For example, people's brain chemistry differs, and in the last 30 years, psychobiologists have discovered that we have different balances of dopamines, norepinephrine, serotonin, and those things affect our behavior. Specifically, there's a phenomenon known as reducers augmenters,
mm-hmm.
and there's a flip-flop between the brain and behavior. In other words, if your brain is a reducer, your behavior will be as an augmenter, and vice versa. What do I mean by that?
Mm.
So if you're hypersensitive, if your brain makes you hypersensitive, so you're an augmenter, your behavior, you will tend to reduce stressful and overly exciting and overly stimulating events and experiences and avoid them in order that you don't get overstimulated.
Mm-hmm.
So brain reducers who are experiential augmenters won't be found jumping out of airplanes or driving Harleys in snowstorms.
Which is what you're going to be doing this afternoon in the blizzard, right?
Right. So, of course, that has an effect on advertising. For example, if you're overstimulated by phenomena, you're not going to like loud music. You're not going to like fast cuts in an ad. You're not going to like a lot of things. So that was one area in which the Simmons questionnaire expanded upon the state-of-the-art of psychographics in the advertising and marketing field. So as you said, there were 700 new psychographics not covered by Simmons's almost 700 old psychographics they've had in there for years. So what we've now pulled in also includes some other interesting stuff like belief in extrasensory perception,
Mm-hmm.
people's spiritual life,
Mm.
where they fit on a Maslowian axiological values scale.
And that's the hierarchy of needs, right? Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah, that there are. In order to measure that accurately, you need to ask about 15 to 20 questions. So we figured that out, and we put that in. We studied other Maslowian scales. We weren't happy with it, so Dr. Stephen Millman, who is the chief scientist at Simmons, and I changed that scale. Very grateful for his and Pat Pellegrini's help in getting this stuff right. So we've learned a lot. We now have about 1,500, 1,600 different psychographic indicators, both the ones that were in the old Simmons, the new Simmons, and the driver tags themselves, which are derived not from questions but from viewing TV program viewing. So put that all together, it's a massive amount of information, which right now Stephen Millman is with his team getting ready for the ARF presentation next week. We just got the data back, and it's next week's presentation. We're not going to be able to present everything in a half hour anyway, but we're going to be able to say which are the most predictive of brand choice of these psychological indicators that we've collected. We've already seen, one simple measure that the industry is used to is the index number. People are used to index numbers as an indication of degree of relationship between two variables.
Sure. Kind of affinity scores.
Yeah, very familiar to every practitioner in advertising. So when you look at the index numbers for different brands based on the old psychographics, you tend to see that everything is generally in a range between an 80 index and a 120 index.
Mm-hmm.
For the new psychographics and the driver tags, it's more like from 15 to several thousand index.
Wow.
Yeah.
Much more granular.
Much more discerning and much more related to brand choice, which is unbelievably exciting to me.
And so you're going to be talking about that with Pat Pellegrini at the ARF conference next week. Is that correct?
Yeah. It will be a week from today. We're doing this on March 14th. It'll be on March 21st at 9:45 a.m. From the main stage. It made the main stage. I'll be talking again later that day in a breakout presentation with the CEO of Standard Media Index, James Fennessy, at 2:50, talking about brands who have bought into the digital revolution a little too far, too fast, and their sales are going down because they've been draining television to pay Paul.
Right.
And I'm looking forward to putting all this together with ROI. How does this psychological stuff predict ROI? One terrific thing that we've got, courtesy of Howard Schimmel at Turner and Beth Rockwood, who works with him at Turner, they did an ROI study involving driver tags where they showed that if you took advantage of knowing what the driver tags of the ads were, there were 15 ads in the study that Turner did. If you take advantage of that and you try to put the ads in programs that have as many of the same driver tags as possible, and we found that the inflection point was 60%. If you find shows that have at least 60% of the same driver tags, you get a 35 to 37% lift in ROI, according to Nielsen Catalina.
That is that lift is mind-boggling. 35%. That's crazy.
I know, and when you compare it to all the work I did at TRA, which showed sometimes you got hundreds of percent increase in ROI by targeting purchasers, heavy swing purchasers in particular. But the average was 28%. The average lift from targeting the right purchasers, sales responsive purchasers, is 28%. Well, gosh, the context effect is 35%.
Yeah, yeah, and it's amazing to me that I as we were preparing for the upcoming ARF and being over at their headquarters last week, talking about the impact of this adjacency or the context and how the industry hasn't really taken advantage of that, and even ordering within a pod. If you take a look at the pod of advertisements, having those advertisements where they're placed in that pod, if they're the first advertisement, the first commercial, or the third one in that, and also the driver tags associated with the adjacent advertisements have an impact on the drop-off rate as well. It's really fascinating when you dig into that, because to date it's kind of been, there's a pod, there's some inventory, just shove your ad into it, sometimes through programmatic means, but not through leveraging the psychographic mechanisms like we've got here with driver tags.
Well, even though advertising itself is a highly psychological phenomenon, that has been lost in the process. Now, we're doing this by rote, shove the spot into the slot and go on to the next thing, and do it based only on sex age.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's been reduced down to just that, and it's kind of like so things have in the advertising industry, like you said there, been reduced to sex, age, maybe geography, and that's kind of a major reductionist tendency that's happened. And I think one of the things that I'm understanding that you're advocating for is kind of broadening that back out to these psychographic variables and taking it down to the different levels so that you can do this targeted advertisement, and also finding the right advertisements that go along with the right programs.
Yeah, if you put it all together, if you optimize based not on one thing but on all of it, we can see hundreds of % increase in ROI by adding these variables together. I mean, if you just take context and purchaser targeting, and you add 28 to 35, you're already up in the 60-something % range of ROI increase, and all of that is still media. And 4 different stand-up research companies have corroborated that creative, what's in the ad itself, is 65 to 80% of the ROI effect. So if you're up to the 60s in ROI percent increase without touching the ad itself, when you change the ad itself, you're going to be over 100% in average ROI increase, more in individual cases. And all it takes is for us to put this stuff together.
Yeah,
we've had it. We haven't had it at this level, but we've now got all the data we need to do this, to optimize ROI.
It's ROI maximized is the term I've seen you putting out these days, and I totally agree with it. So bringing this back around, though, to the article that's being published this week called "A House Divided Itself Cannot Stand." This is the article that we started the show off today talking about, taking these driver tags and viewing behavior along with the other psychographics and developing these profiles of people that are pessimistic about Trump, that are optimistic about Trump. Obviously, Trump, if you think about Trump as a brand, you could swap out Trump with something else and do the same type of study. But in this case of taking a look at Trump, this article is going to be here shortly. Can you talk with us about where our listeners are going to be able to go read this article?
Yeah, it's Myers Biz Bloggers, the Myers Media Village. It's my blog in Myers, which is called In Terms of ROI. So people could find it just by Googling In Terms of ROI Myers. Myers is Myers. And they'll get all of my articles all in one place, all of my Myers articles. Anyway, and this should come out tomorrow is my guess.
Great.
We just submitted it yesterday.
Excellent. So I'll put a link to that in the show notes for this podcast as well, so it'll go along with this here. So, well, listen, Bill, I want to thank you sincerely for taking some time out of the blizzard today, putting that shovel aside that you've been using to get your Harley ready for a ride here this afternoon. And joining with me here on nsight.media to talk about Trump, to talk about driver tags, to talk about the upcoming ARF conference.
Always a pleasure. Look forward to the next time.